A woolly mammoth weighs 6 tons. Your ancestor weighed maybe 130 pounds, held a sharpened stick, and walked toward it anyway. That should not have worked. No claws, no fangs, no fur thick enough to survive a night in the cold. And yet somehow, for over 1,000,000 years, humans hunted animals that could kill them in seconds. Mammoths, wild horses, herds of reindeer moving faster than any human on foot. So, how did a slow, soft, practically weaponless primate become one of the deadliest hunters the planet has ever produced? The answer isn't strength. It's a plan, and the plan changed depending on exactly what you were hunting. Start with the body, because every plan needed one that could last. Around 2 million years ago, human legs lengthened, Achilles tendons grew springy, and sweat glands multiplied until humans had more of them than almost any other mammal alive. Researcher Daniel Lieberman at Harvard has spent decades asking why, and the evidence points somewhere unexpected. Humans weren't built to fight. They were built to outlast. A cheetah overheats after a few hundred meters. A human, jogging steadily through the hottest part of the day, can chase an animal for hours until its body simply gives out. This is still practiced today by the San people of the Kalahari, but endurance alone doesn't explain how anyone brought down something the size of a small building. Take the mammoth first, because nothing tested a hunting plan like 6 tons of muscle and tusk. Hunters didn't charge a mammoth head-on. They used the ground against it. At sites like Mezhyryk in Ukraine, archaeologists have found the remains of dwellings built almost entirely from mammoth bones, evidence of repeated, successful hunts over generations. One method involved driving a mammoth toward soft, boggy terrain or thin ice, where its own weight worked against it, sinking it deep enough that a group of hunters could approach the exposed flanks and legs relatively safely. Another involved deep pits, dug along known travel paths and disguised with branches and snow, lined with sharpened stakes at the bottom. A mammoth that fell in couldn't easily climb back out. From there, hunters used long, thrusting spears, not thrown from a distance, but driven in close, aimed just behind the front leg, where a strike could reach the lungs. Even with a pit or a bog working in their favor, a wounded mammoth was still capable of killing every hunter nearby in a single swing of its trunk or a single charge. So hunters worked in relays, one small group closing in to strike, while others stood ready at a distance, prepared to draw the animal's attention away if it turned toward the wrong person. Nobody fought a mammoth alone. Nobody was meant to. The entire hunt was built around the assumption that any single hunter might fail, and the group would still succeed. Wild horses called for something different, because horses were fast, alert, and impossible to outsprint in open ground. At Solutré, in eastern France, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of over 100,000 horses at the base of a limestone cliff, accumulated across thousands of years of repeated hunts. The strategy echoes the same trick used on bison an ocean away. Drive lines of hunters, hidden behind rock and brush, funneled panicked herds toward a drop the animals couldn't see coming until it was too late. A single, well-timed stampede could feed an entire community through a hard winter, all without a single spear needing to strike a moving target. Reindeer demanded patience instead of a cliff. Twice a year, massive herds crossed the same rivers and narrow valleys on their migration, and they did it on a schedule ancient hunters learned to predict almost to the week. At river crossings, hunters positioned themselves in the water or along the banks, using spears and, later, a tool that changed everything, the spear thrower. A spear thrower is a simple lever, little more than a grooved stick, but it extends the arc of a throwing arm and roughly doubles the speed and distance of a spear. Biomechanist Neil Roach has studied how the human shoulder already works like a slingshot for throwing, and the spear thrower stacks a second lever on top of that, letting a hunter strike a swimming reindeer from a canoe or the riverbank without ever entering reach of its antlers. And for the groups who lived along coastlines and rivers, rather than open plains, the most dangerous predator in the water often wasn't the point. Fish were. Coastal and river-dwelling groups built fish weirs, wooden fences staked into riverbeds and tidal flats, arranged to funnel fish into a narrow opening where they could be speared or scooped out by hand at low tide. Remnants of exactly this kind of weir have been found preserved in the mud along England's Severn estuary, some of the wood still bearing tool marks from where it was shaped and driven into the riverbed thousands of years ago. Where fish needed to be caught in open water, hunters used harpoons tipped with barbed antler or bone points, designed so the barb caught inside the fish and held even as it thrashed. Simple hooks, carved from bone and shaped into a curve, have turned up at sites across the ancient world, proof that this technology was independently discovered again and again wherever humans settled near water. In deeper water, hunters used harpoons with detachable heads, connected to the shaft by a cord, so a struck fish or seal could pull free of the pole entirely and simply tire itself out fighting the line, rather than dragging the hunter's only weapon down with it. Why build a spear that's designed to fall apart on impact? Because a weapon that lets the prey exhaust itself is safer than a weapon that forces a fight at close range. None of these methods worked without tracking, the skill underneath every single one of them. Anthropologist Louis Liebenberg spent years documenting how expert trackers read a landscape, and what he found looks less like instinct and more like early science. A bent blade of grass, the depth of a hoofprint, the angle of a broken twig, each detail becomes a clue, tested against the next clue, revised when it's wrong. Some researchers now argue that tracking may be one of the very first forms of the scientific method, practiced tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote a formula down. Timing mattered as much as tools. Hunters rarely went after the strongest animal in a herd. They watched for the one slightly separated from the group, the one limping, the one young enough to tire early or old enough to fall behind. Isolating a single animal from dozens of others wasn't a failure of ambition, it was the entire strategy. Every one of these hunts also depended on an object built specifically for the job. A thrusting spear for a mammoth trapped in a pit, a long throwing spear for a horse driven off a ledge, a spear thrower for a reindeer crossing open water, a barbed harpoon for a fish that would otherwise slip straight off the point. Around 500,000 years ago, the human shoulder itself evolved to make one of these possible in the first place. An overhand throw that works almost like a slingshot, storing elastic energy and releasing it in a fraction of a second. A chimpanzee, pound for pound far stronger than a human, throws like an amateur. Your ancestors evolved a body built to specialize, and then kept inventing new tools to specialize even further. Strip away any single piece of this and the hunt falls apart. Endurance without tracking is just wandering. Tracking without the right tool for the right animal is just information with nowhere to go. It took the whole system, adapted again and again to whatever was in front of it, mammoth or horse or reindeer or fish, coordinated by hunters who had to trust a plan they couldn't fully see the end of yet. And that, more than any single weapon, might be the real inheritance, not the spear, not the harpoon. The instinct to look at an impossible problem, break it down into exactly the right tool for exactly the right moment, and follow the plan through to the end even when the outcome isn't visible yet. Every time you do that at your own desk, on your own deadline, you're running software your ancestors wrote at a river crossing, a boggy pit, or the edge of a quiet cliff.
Smash that subscribe button and hit like right now. What hit different? Drop a comment and I'll see you next time.